Welcome to the show. It has many names: Sasquatch, Yowie, Bigfoot, Yeti. A very elusive beast. However, in the past 50 years, there has been over 10,000 reported sightings of this creature in the United States alone. So here to discuss this topic in depth is Attila from the documentary Track, Searching for Australia's Bigfoot. Now, I've always been fascinated in Bigfoot, watching many documentaries, hearing a lot of campfire stories. When did your research and interest begin, Attila?
Mate, I actually first did a little documentary series called Paranormal Investigators back in 2006, and funny enough, the first platform that it went on was TVS in Sydney and C31 in Melbourne. So that's going back a little while, and then we continued doing a Paranormal Investigators a Challenge in 2007 and did 2 seasons of that. So I've always sort of had an interest in the unexplained, but I've done quite a few documentaries over the years and reality TV shows, one talk show. So it's been quite a journey actually.
That's excellent. Very impressive work. And I'm sure a lot of people would really be fascinated. Now, the Patterson-Gimlin footage is among the most credible videos that captures this beast, isn't it?
Well, yes. I think that was the catalyst for a lot of people. The Gimlin footage, and I know people have been trying to dissect it many years. They've released a 4K version as well. They've obviously used a software to balance it out a little bit. Yeah, so that footage has actually changed a lot of people's perspective, I guess, and drawn them into an area of interest that I don't think otherwise they would have actually pursued. So I think for a lot of people that footage was a catalyst to I guess search or to become an active researcher or even content producer of creatures that sort of fall into that category of cryptozoology.
Yes, and it's believed that this creature is nocturnal, isn't it?
Well, that's what the belief is. Certainly, in the latest documentary that I did, there was a gentleman who we interviewed by the name of Neil Frost. He's a highly respected cryptozoologist in Australia, and he did come up with some very interesting theories about I guess the characteristics of the Australian Bigfoot and perhaps even other similar creatures around the world, that they are in fact nocturnal, and what makes them such a creature, or what makes them nocturnal in a way of the physiology of the eyes and so forth.
Now, trail cameras have been remarkable in capturing unknown cryptids roaming around. This has been excellent in the hunt for Bigfoot, hasn't it?
Look, to be honest, I don't think really there's been a lot of evidence captured by trail cameras, and there are a lot of, I guess, there's a lot of speculation as to why that's happened. Ultimately, you know, when we're dealing with creatures like the Bigfoot, for example, we have to understand that, you know, based on, you know, reports and people citing experiences, that ultimately we're dealing with not just your standard sort of wild animal, you know, in the bush. We're dealing with something that's far more intelligent. There is a possibility that you know, that frequencies emitted by electronic devices are actually picked up by these creatures, and it's possible that it might be detracting them. I mean, what we've experienced and what other people have experienced is that these creatures like to stay away from people rather than actually go towards them, unless you're in a region where, you know, there's a potential hunting ground, or perhaps it's mating season, or maybe there is a cluster of, you know, you might have, you know, an alpha male that might even tend to intimidate you. And we've had very similar encounters, indirect encounters, mind you. And there's a number of reasons why that happens. And I guess the only way that we can compare these creatures is similar to the way, you know, gorillas act in nature. Although we are dealing with something that's a little bit more intelligent than that. That's what the speculation is. And I firmly believe that myself as well.
Yes, very intelligent creature. It's been able to elude its capture. Now, some have found Bigfoot prints and they've taken a plaster cast, and you can actually see some of the patterns on the bottom of the foot. It's very much like fingerprints on a human. You can actually see the dermal ridging, can't you?
There's quite a number of people out there, even Australian researchers, that have actually discovered footprints. In fact, when I was filming Track, Search for Australia's Bigfoot, we actually discovered a massive footprint, which I think was about 16 or 17 inches, about 40 odd centimetres in length. So it was quite, fascinating to actually see something like that. And this was actually amongst tree structures that we discovered during that evening when we were when we were filming the documentary, and when we were sort of pursuing a possible region that we probably regarded as more of a habitat than anything else. But yeah, there are researchers out there who've actually successfully casted, were able to successfully get a cast of a large footprint that potentially could be created by the Australian Bigfoot.
Mm. Many have taken a sample of what is believed to be Bigfoot fur, and the lab results have determined the DNA sequencing is very close to humans. And this is remarkable, isn't it?
Well, it is, mate. It is, because there's been a number of cases, and there's been a number of claims actually that people have actually discovered, biological matter that belongs to so-called, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, over in the Americas. So there has been some DNA sequencing done, and some of their claims is that yes, it's very similar to the human DNA, but it is also mixed with something else. So I know there's been a lot of misidentifications over the years, but look, nonetheless, I think it's been a very interesting journey for everybody, especially those who've been spending so much time in researching the possibilities of a relic hominid that's living out in the wilderness. So look, I think we are getting close. Look, you speak to people like the Indigenous folk, and especially the traditional owners of the land in Australia, and they will tell you that, to a certain degree, that they did actually live side by side with these creatures before colonisation. So what I gather is there was a mutual respect, and when they had to when migration occurred, and there was a reason why there was migration with certain tribe members. And one particular story that I heard is that there were specific, clusters or tribes of the original or traditional owners of the land here. And the reason why they moved is to give way to the Australian Bigfoot, or a troop of Bigfoot, which mean it could have been hunting season, I don't know what. So these were territories that were shared by our traditional owners. And you'll find and hear very similar stories in North America as well. How the North American Indians had a very similar very similar history with these relic hominids. Obviously, there are very, very, there's a lot of similarities, but also there are also differences between the Australian version of Bigfoot and the American version of Bigfoot as well.
Yes, and some people have made attempts to try and communicate with the creature with a technique called wood knocking, a series of taps on a tree, and that has been made to try and attract the beast. This is a common technique, isn't it, Attila?
Look, a lot of researchers actually use these techniques. We don't really know what it actually means. I mean, a lot of people have their own theories as to what it actually means, whether it's a warning sign to other creatures in the area that there's either humans nearby or the coast is clear. I don't know, but people have had success. There's a call and response, if you want to call it that. I personally find that when you stay silent and just listen, you tend to hear more than actually become a little bit more active and making assumptions that what you're doing is in fact a level of communication. And even if it is, we don't know what kind of communication that is. It could be hostility. It could be other forms of communication that we simply don't understand. So I personally think that when I'm out in the field with the guys and I'm filming, the guys generally sort of keep silent and just listen, because you will hear. You'd be amazed how much you actually hear from the bush when you're otherwise just running through and going on a mission, where a lot of people actually do in the bush. And you'll find people who say, I've been hiking for 25, 30 years and haven't seen anything. But when you're observant and you see people hike, a lot of them have their mission or have earphones in or just look at the ground and that's it, and they just want to get to their point of destination. When I'm hiking through bush with the guys, we take that opportunity just to look around the area and take note of everything. And you'll find that, and I've learned this from a lot of really nice Indigenous people that I've met over the years, is that you need to sort of pay attention to what we call as signposts, birds, structures in the bush, just small things that sort of give you ideas as to, what's around, whether it's, a lyrebird digging up a hole, whether we've got wild pigs or wild dogs in the area. You listen to your environment and that kind of tells you a story on its own.
Very much so. It's advised to use your 5 senses. Many people are distracted with headphones and music playing. They're just not really connected to their environment, so many sightings would go unnoticed. And we've had many respectable people step forward that have seen this creature, doctors, lawyers, and that gives a lot of credence to this case when you have high-profile people in the community saying that they've seen strange beasts running across the road or something to that effect. That makes people take it a lot more seriously, doesn't it?
Well, it does, but we also have to understand that there are a lot of professional people out there with high-profile jobs that you would regard as a qualified observer. A lot of these people don't actually come forward. They will contact a researcher or somebody who deals with this type of topic, in fact, I've had this discussion with a well-known a wildlife specialist and cryptozoologist, Gary Opert, who lives on the border of New South Wales and Queensland. And Gary has told me over time that, there are people, some sort of people in high places who actually come forward and report a sighting, but they don't want it to be disclosed to the public. They just want to talk to somebody who will understand and be able to confirm and tell them, look, you're not nuts. Other people have actually seen this, and people have been seeing this for thousands of years. So it's not a new thing. But yes, it does add a lot of credence to it, to these sightings, and you only need to sort of pay attention to some of these reports and talk to the right people, and then you tend to understand, what's really happening. Over the years, I've actually spoken to people who were in the military who've had encounters, and I mean, these guys are trained observers. They need to understand what they're dealing with in the bush, and especially when you're talking to people who are either in some form of some division of the special forces, whether they're commandos or SAS. It doesn't matter. These guys are trained observers to be able to identify targets in the bush. So when someone sees something that's a little bit out of left field, like a relic hominid that's about 8 or 9 foot tall, I mean, look, you just got to do the maths.
Where there has been a lot of bear sightings, they've seen Bigfoot roaming around. So that's a common area, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. Look, Jeff, I really don't know about that because, to be honest, I haven't done a lot of sort of, digging deep into this type of stuff on the American side of things.
Yep.
I've primarily concentrated largely on the Australian phenomena, and to be honest, I mean, in America, it's very easy to sort of say to somebody, oh, well, you just saw a bear, standing on its hind legs, and it could be easily explained away. In Australia, we don't have bears. So when someone sees a massive 7, 8, 10-foot tall creature standing on its hind legs, you can sit there and start scratching your head and start thinking, well, what are you going to compare it to? Is it a kangaroo? Yeah, I don't think so. It's not big enough. And the way these people actually describe what they're seeing is unlike a kangaroo, a big red. I mean, we know that a big red can stand up to 2.5, 3 meters tall. I don't know if they're that tall, but I know they can stand up pretty high. Like I said before, these sightings, it's not exclusive to Europeans. We have to appreciate and respect the fact that the traditional owners of the land in Australia have been encountering these animals for perhaps thousands of years. And I honestly believe that we need to respect that, if not anything else, but we have to respect at least that. That there is there's got to be an element of truth there, even for those people who think, well, this simply can't be real. There is an interesting argument on that too, though, Jeff. I'm sorry I'm digressing a little bit here, but there's a chimpanzee known as the Billy ape, which was discovered, I think, back in 2002. And if I remember correctly, there was a local tribe in Africa that were talking about these giant chimpanzees. And scientists were actually fascinated by it, and they were going out trying to attempt to record these. And I think it wasn't until 2005 and 2006 did they actually end up seeing these animals and documenting them. And it took them years to actually do that. So, we're looking at species that are being discovered almost on a daily basis. And I know that people say, well, how come such a large animal hasn't been sighted before? Well, you have to understand that again, we're not dealing with your standard, mammal out in the wilderness. We're dealing with something that's highly intelligent, that has the ability to blend in so well into the natural environment. I mean, another example, when we were filming, we were lucky enough to have a thermal imaging camera. And there was a tawny frogmouth owl sitting on a branch, and for the life of us, we wouldn't have been able to see it had the thermal imaging camera not picked it up.
Wow.
It was exactly the same color as the tree that it was sitting on. And it was remarkable. So what you have here is a form of adaptation, and animals, certain creatures around the world, have the ability to adapt to their own natural environment. So regardless how big these creatures are, what we have to understand is we're not just dealing with something that was placed into the wilderness recently. We're dealing with something that potentially could have been there for hundreds of thousands of years. Perhaps, I'm not sure, I don't know. But looking at it from a logical perspective, and from a perspective that that something like this, or we start entertaining the idea that something like this could potentially exist in the wilderness. How do they exist? And how is it that only very few people have actually seen them? So it's not a difficult thing to appreciate and understand why not many people have actually seen these creatures. There are many areas in the wilderness that are what we'd call as restricted areas or special areas where we're not allowed to go to. So the wilderness is massive. It's huge. And I honestly believe that these animals have by that time have already worked out how far humans can actually penetrate into the wilderness. So they already understand. This is my understanding is they would have the appreciation or even the understanding of how far, what the limitations are for human beings and where they can't go to. So, we need to look at this as a big picture. We need to compare other animals that we know. So once we understand and appreciate these other animals that exist in the wilderness and how they're very difficult to locate, if we entertain the idea of a highly intelligent hominid that exists in the wilderness, well, then our ability to be able to see that is far more remote than those who are looking to find a gorilla in its natural habitat or a billy ape in its natural habitat.
Excellent point you raised too. They're so deep in the wilderness, they've got a gauge on how far humans can penetrate the dense forests. So that gives them a barrier of protection. Very important information. And, you know, physical anthropologists have come forward. They've stated, yes, the walking, it's completely different. Many families have been camping. They've been taking home video. The witness reportings have been remarkable. There's footage of one, it's running full sprint across a field. They tried to replicate that with a track and field runner in a costume, and they were unsuccessful, which determines that it must have been something, a foreign creature that was able to cover that amount of ground in so little time. Remarkable, isn't it? Some of the witness sightings and the Bigfoot hunting. They've captured a witness testimony. She said she's seen a Bigfoot hunting time where they were tearing apart animals with their claws, completely disemboweling their prey. Very gruesome, isn't it?
Well, it is, but I guess we need to sort of take a lot of these things that we see on YouTube with a grain of salt too, because there's so many hoax videos out there that it's you know, it's almost like, you know, UFO videos. You know, they're almost a dime a dozen. You know, there's so many people out there that are sort of like to entertain the public and saying, oh, look, this is a real footage of a UFO or a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch or a demon or whatever it is that, you know, they want to capture. Yeah, there certainly have been people who've reported, you know, especially truck drivers, I believe, on the Pilligers have actually seen these creatures taking carcasses in from the road. So there is, I guess, there could be a level of brutality. I don't know. I guess, you know, it's almost like humanity. I mean, let's just let's just take our recent COVID-19 into consideration. I mean, you know, desperate shoppers at Woolworths and the level that they go to you know, acquire goods. I mean, I guess at a moment of desperation, regardless what species you are, I guess there is a form of animalistic nature that comes out in us, and survival mode kicks in regardless of what species you are. So, look, it could be that, you know, there was a lack of food. The whole violent aspect of these creatures, I think, is and a lot of people, I think, will probably disagree with me, but I think this whole violent aspect that these creatures are out to just kill you, I think, is a misconception. I do believe that, just like with people, there could be rogues out there, and if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, then, you know, game over. But I think, as a whole, I don't think we're dealing with you know, aggressive creatures. Again, you know, if we look at the way gorillas live, yeah, you'll have a silverback and they'll charge at you. They'll bluff charge you to tell you, look, can you please leave because this is our territory, you know. So I think when people experience something like that, they automatically think, well, this creature's out there to kill me. And look, I don't blame them for thinking that, because it's not every day that you see something like that. So I do believe that we are dealing with creatures that I guess in nature, I guess by default, I don't think that they are as aggressive as what we think they are.
And that could very much be the case, because there has been stories of a Bigfoot gifting where they've left some type of object of significance on a tree stump, and then that's been taken, and then the Bigfoot has left something in return. That's like a way of a greeting or a way of giving thanks, isn't it?
That's right. There was a story that actually happened in Australia, and Gary Alpert told me this story, and there was one particular area where this lady actually saw a family of them, and I don't actually remember exactly. I think she gave them a gift, like left something out for them, and in return they gave her dead rats as a return on her doorstep. So she'd wake up in the morning and the food or whatever she gave them was gone, but in return there was a few dead rats that were laid out in a row. So look, there's been a number of stories like that, over the years, and where there is a form of, a form of appreciation for one another between two species, and I guess that we are encroaching more and more into the natural wilderness, and it's cutting down on the area that these animals and other animals have obviously have used these regions as their home or their hunting ground. And as seasons change, obviously their migration changes, and we've actually changed all that because of our, I guess, increasing population and our quest for new territory and fresh land to be able to sustain the growth in population. So, I look. There is an appreciation, I believe, and there is I think that there could be coexistence between the two species.
What it definitely indicates, and some people have come across what they believe to be a Bigfoot nesting. There's been bedding. They've managed to find where they believe it lives, as well as abandoned mine shafts as well. That would be perfect habitat for someone to hide, a creature to hide and not be detected in such areas, isn't it?
I mean, I guess it's very difficult to be able to pinpoint where these relic hominids would actually live. In the recent documentary, again, so I keep going back to that, when we were filming in a part of the mountains region, the Blue Mountains region, we actually found a hut. Actually, we found two. We found one that looked like more of a shelter that was stringed together, and there was another one that was a dead-set hut. You can actually see it was a hut. Now, we do have different types of Bigfoot in Australia. We have the smaller species, which we refer to them here locally as the Junjidi, and then there are the more larger species that they grow up to 7 to 10 foot tall, which are known as the Dooligal. So what I believe that what we actually discovered were these little huts, and I think they were just temporary structures, and it's possible that they just sort of little hunting huts, if you like, or just a temporary accommodation for these creatures when they go hunting, and they can't make it back because of bad weather or whatnot. But I do believe that we were actually dealing with at the time with the little ones. So yeah, it's hard to tell. I mean, where they actually live. I mean, they can definitely live in caves. They can live in mine shafts, old mine shafts, abandoned mine shafts. I mean, your guess is as good as mine, mate. I mean, we haven't found one yet, but even if we do, I to be honest, I don't think I'd be disclosing that. Or I know I wouldn't be disclosing that.
Mm-hmm. Important information. And some people have claimed to see trees and branches, and they've been snapped at a certain height where humans wouldn't be able to reach up and snap that. So, something must have been 7 or 8 foot tall with a tremendous amount of force and muscle behind it to be able to pull something like that off.
The trait of these creatures, I believe, and when we were filming the documentary, we actually found a number of these structures, and there was one particular one that was it was broken at probably about 6.5 foot. But we're not talking about a stick here. We're talking about a decent sized tree here that was snapped in half, and the top part of the actual trunk was actually placed on top of the actual tree stump, what was remained. It was perfectly balanced. I've never seen anything quite like it before. Wow. I've seen similar structures, but this was in a basically like a T shape, and it was sitting there perfectly. And wherever it came from, obviously it was carried at some distance, and you can tell by the roots and by the actual the condition of the tree that it would have been there fairly recently removed, so it still had life in it. To be able to do something like that. Now, whether a storm knocked it out somewhere and it was dragged over, it's quite possible. But this thing was a massive tree, was sitting on another one, and it was like a seesaw, just perfectly balanced out. So there's some really remarkable stuff out there for sure.
We hear a lot of reports of sightings where there's been a large male, a female, and a few cubs following and they've been crossing a road or a stream, they follow and they travel in packs sometimes, don't they?
Well, that's a good question, because occasionally what's actually happened in the past, I'm just trying to think back some of the experiences that we've had and I've heard. There were incidences where people have heard numerous wood knocks around them. In fact, we got ourselves into a situation back in 2013 where it felt like that these creatures were closing in, because you can hear the thumps, you can hear the movement in the trees, and they would, funny enough, move only when the wind picked up. So it was almost like trying to be stealth, but there was only 4 of us at the time, and it was horrifying. So they were closing in. Now, whether or not it was a family, I doubt that very much. I think if anything, there would have been males involved to be able to sort of close and try to intimidate you. There was another incident where we were, and this is at the very beginning of the documentary that I talk about, this incident that scared the hell out of me. And we were on an expedition, a completely different purpose and different motivation altogether. And we were hiking through the rainforest at night, and these massive creatures were like bulldozering their way through the forest. And there were 2 of them. So they were escorting us out by hitting the trees and displaying some fairly intimidating displays. We couldn't see it, but we could hear it. And it was, it seems like that what we've encountered was more sort of male testosterone involved rather than females with the young ones. But look, anything's possible. I mean, if they do start migrating, I guess that they would have their I think they refer to them as troops, just like the gorillas.
Yes.
When they're in a pack, a troop of Bigfoot. So they would, I guess, migrate very similar to the way the gorillas would. So they would have their own territory, I guess. And they would actually, and we've actually noticed this where the colder months seem to be more active, and then the warmer months they completely die off. So it's possible that they move into a more isolated region during the warmer months, and in the colder months they tend to sort of come back, because ultimately, people don't really like going hiking, in the middle of winter at 10, 11 o'clock at night. So, look, it's like I said, anything's possible.
Yes, very much so. And a lot of people they tell stories and they're not taken seriously. A lot of people believe it's a myth because they're very secretive. And I guess a lot of the way they must bury their own when one Bigfoot is deceased, and then they would decompose rapidly. That's how come we haven't been able to find any bones of any of these beasts. They must bury their own. Do you believe that's the case?
It's an incident, actually, funny enough. I was talking to a fellow who lives up in Armidale, and there was a farmer up there that was ploughing his field, and I believe that he acquired a new lot of land there that hadn't been ploughed before, and he actually did dig up this massive skull, apparently. And he said that it almost looked like an ape skull, and it was a very, very big skull, apparently. It was much larger than a human skull, and he kept it under his bed for a few years. And I said, look, I'm willing to drive up to Armidale just to have a look at this thing. And the guy said, well, yeah, okay, no worries, I'll find out where it is and I'll let you know. So when he got back to me, he actually told me that the fellow actually disposed of it. So he got rid of the skull because he was obviously concerned, that finding something like that, he could lose his land or lose the rights of actually working on his land. So, farmers, if they do discover something like that, they do think about the consequences about disclosing things like that, whether it's then, regarded as, that land would be regarded as heritage land or even maybe perhaps even Indigenous land. I don't know. It's, it's quite a shame that I couldn't actually get my hands on that, because I think something like that is almost, you'd probably refer to something like that as a smoking gun. To be able to sort of, find and have something like that studied. But then again, if you do sort of send something like that off to to get analysed and studied, would it ever see the light of day? Would the results see the light of day? That's I guess a question that would linger in the back of my mind.
That is the million-dollar question. Would it be returned or would it be confiscated by the government, which is very common with findings from archaeologists and many other discoveries. It's always covered over and swept away by the government. So yeah, that would be a definite concern. A lot of the descriptions are all very similar. A large beast, hunched over, with their hands past the knees, all very similar. Reddish gold sort of fur or hair, not much of a neck. It's like the head was attached to the shoulders. And all of the descriptions are very similar, aren't they?
And obviously this is coming from anecdotal cases. And what people have actually seen, and the people that we've actually interviewed for the documentary, and we've actually had the images recreated. And they do have humanistic appearances, but it's very confusing, because when you some witnesses do actually say that they're stunned because they haven't seen anything like this, and the last thing on their mind is to get a camera out and take a photo, because they're looking at something that looks human but is not human, and it's kind of a mixture between a great ape and a human being. And as your brain's trying to process what you're seeing, it's, you know, but by the time you actually think, oh shit, I should get my phone out and record this, you know, it's too late. But yeah, to come back to your original question, there seem to be a lot of similarities between, you know, the Australian, what I would call as the indigenous wild folk, and the American, you know, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, and their version of our wild folk too. So, or their version of wild folk. So. And also the heights vary. It's funny because some of the heights that people claim, you know, they've seen creatures that are about as tall as an average human being, you know, 6-7 foot tall. Maybe not 7, but maybe around 6.5 foot tall. So it's a tall human being. And then others claim that they're much larger, you know. And then there are other claims like a gentleman who was interviewed, his name is Yowie Dan, and he actually saw a Junjidi, which is the small version. They grow up to about 3 foot tall, but their facial features are so different from the larger ones again. So, but there are similarities between, you know, the shape of the skull, the pinnacle on top of the skull, you know, the way they carry themselves, the long arms, and so forth, the color of the fur, their reaction to light, for example, the ability, or the actual whole nocturnal side of their characteristics. So yeah, there are certainly a lot of similarities between the two.
There sure is. Well, look, I'm very impressed with all your work and the research that you have done. If people wanted to find out more and investigate themselves, how would they go about finding your documentary and the work that you have completed?
Well, we obviously have a website, which is paranormalinvestigators.tv, and that's basically got most of the work that I've done over the years is on there. But the recent documentary is titled Track, Search for Australia's Bigfoot. It's available on iTunes. It's available through Microsoft on Blu-ray DVD that can be ordered. It's doing its rounds now over in the States at the moment, and I believe it will come to sort of Amazon Prime in Australia soon, and Google as well. So yeah, so it's out there and people can view it.
Excellent. Well, I thank you very much for appearing on the program. I strongly urge everyone to get a copy of the DVD or watch the film, Track, Search for Australia's Bigfoot. Well, that does it for today's show. It's Bigfoot Week here at We Are Change, so look forward to more exciting interviews with experts in the field. Be sure to like, share and subscribe, and consider becoming a patron. Until next time.